breed selection for the tropics. So we want to see how we can select breeds that are well adapted to tropical conditions. So I am an animal breeder by training. I hold a PhD in animal breeding and genetics, but I've always been working on poultry, and hence my interest in poultry production and management also. But what we are going to talk about will be mainly genetics and physiology. So you realize that for some years now we have improved a lot when it comes to poultry meat production. I'm talking about broilers and poultry eggs production, layers. We have had significant improvement. Today, you raise your broilers for just 6 weeks and they weigh 3 kilograms already. Sometimes they can even go beyond that. It's wonderful. Those who have been raising poultry for quite some time will tell you a few years ago it wasn't like that. So we have had a lot of improvement when it comes to poultry production. These improvements that we have had are based on, one, nutritional improvement. So our nutritionists, they have made a lot of strides when it comes to feeding the birds. And this is resulting in the improvement that we see. Also, our veterinarians have also done well, helping us with vaccinations and diagnosing diseases, and then taking care of the health of the birds. And so we have improvement today. Thirdly, poultry management practices had also improved a lot. Today we are improving our conditions at the farm level. Biosecurity is improving in many farms. And because of that, we have improvement. Because if you have birds and they don't get sick, they develop well. We also have housing improvement. So conditions when it comes to housing has also improved significantly. Today, many are using housing types that really help birds to develop and grow very well. But the main reason for improvement is genetics. So the improvement that we see, the main reason for it is genetics. It's because the geneticists are working. They work all the time to improve the genetic potential of the birds. And so it makes genetics very crucial. And you realize that in genetics, we have the primary breeder. So these primary breeders are independent breeding companies. Their work is to develop parent stock. So they collect a lot of genetic materials. They bring these genetic materials to their breeding station and they do selection. They do crossing and continuous selection. And through this continuous selection, they are able to develop what we call grandparent lines. So every primary breeder has 2 genetic lines at the end of the day. So whatever selection they do, they come up to 2 genetic lines. The one line, we call it male line. So if we say a line, it means it's made up of males and females already. But we call it a male line because if you want to have parent stock, we pick the males from that line. And then they will have a female line, also made up of males and females. But when you need parents, you only pick females from that line. They do this with a lot of investment because nowadays you may have to do a lot of molecular studies when you are doing improvement, and these are very expensive. So when they do that, they sell the parent stock to the parent breeder. So parent breeders, either owned by integrator or a hatchery operator, sometimes may be owned by integrator, and their hatchery operator will buy the parent stock from the integrator or fertile eggs to go and hatch. some hatchery operators have enough resources to also purchase the parent stock, raise them, and hatch the fertile eggs. And so when they hatch, whether broilers or layers, they in turn sell them to poultry farmers, and farmers raise these birds. So that is how poultry breeding works. Globally, we have only few poultry breeding companies. Probably you know some of them. Lohman Breeders in Germany, Hendry Genetics in the Netherlands, and other breeding companies. There are few big breeding companies. They sell their products throughout the world, so they have marketing and sales reps in various continents. They help to promote their product. It is because to have such a breeding setup is very expensive, so if you don't have a big market, probably you are going to lose. That also explains why we don't have many breeding companies. In Ghana, we don't have any breeding companies. So these few breeding companies sell their products across the globe. So we are in Ghana, but we buy products from Lohman, from Hendry's, and from other genetic companies. Now, I have a question here. So, can you make a breed by only crossing males and females of two breeds? So, let's say I have some males, and then I bring in some females and I do crossing. Can I sell the outcome to farmers? Is that correct? What do you think? So I've heard no, so we all agree that that is not the right thing. So should hatchery operators or farmers make their own crosses from rare birds that sometimes you don't know their origin, and then sell them to farmers? Should that be something that farmers should invest in? Yeah, so we all agree the answer is no also. The reason is that poultry is very expensive, and the chick is the seed in which you are investing your money. So if the quality of that chick is not good, definitely you are investing in the wrong place. And that is why you have to make sure that what you are investing your money in is really a quality chick. So I don't think it should be allowed for people to just put any males and females together and begin to sell chicks to people to buy. Because I make a genetic point here that a higher percentage of genes in parent stock should be in homozygous state for commercial birds to take advantage of high heterosis, especially in traits with low heritability. So most of the time, what breeding companies do is that they develop two distinct lines, which I've said are made up of males and female for regeneration, so that you can have breeding integrity. So that birds that will produce, we can be sure that they will have the same quality all the time. Because when the grandparents are getting old, because you have males and females, you are able to hatch to have young ones, and you can be regenerating all the time. And most of the time, what you do is that selection is made such that such animals are pure. It means most of the genes in such grandparent lines will exist in homozygous state. So when they bring those two distinct lines together to produce the commercials, most of the genes in commercials will now be in heterozygous state. The heterozygosity will help you to take advantage of what we call heterosis. And heterosis helps in improvement in traits such as egg production, which has low heritability. And that is why if someone picks the commercial to mate, what will happen is that because the genes are in heterozygous state, you are going to have a lot of variation. Because the heterozygosity will result in so many genotypes being formed. And therefore, there will be lack of uniformity in performance of the birds that you have. And many other things will also lack in such birds. And so if we want to do breeding, then we need to make the investment to do it well, not any crossing at all. produce for people to use. Because you see, if you take something like crop production, I mean, farmers can pick in the seeds and plant them. But it's because they do just small scale production, sometimes with their own strength. Okay, their own manual labor, they weed somewhere and they plant. Whatever yields they get, they don't care that much. But like I said, if someone is raising even 5,000 layers, those who are in poultry, they know the cost is so huge. And so you don't want to invest in anything at all. So this is a general breeding program. So if you want to have a breeding program, this is how it looks like. And you see that it is not that simple. So A is definition of production system. So nowadays we want to breed. You need to define the production system. So under which production system would your final output be raised? If it's smallholder farmers, are the birds we raise at backyard? Will it be raised by small-scale producers or medium-scale producers, or you are looking at large-scale producers raising the birds? Because if birds will be raised by small-scale producers, probably at backyard, how you like to breed such birds will be different from birds that will be raised by large-scale producers. So you need to define the production system. After you define the production system, you need to define your breeding goal. So what will be the goal for the breeding? So I want to do breeding work. My goal is to improve meat production for large-scale broiler production in Ghana. That's my goal. So you see that for you to get the goal, you need to define the production system first. Then, after defining production system, you need to set your breeding objectives. So normally breeding objectives, you have to know where you are. So you have certain genetic materials that you want to develop. What is the current performance now in the trait that you want to improve? So if you want to improve weight gain, or dressing percentage, or feed conversion ratio, what is the current conversion ratio now? What is the current weight gain? So if the weight gain, for instance, is, let's say, 1 kg for a period of 6 weeks, okay, where do you want to move to? So I want to move from 1 kg to 3 kg of weight gain within 6 weeks. So that becomes one of my breeding objectives. I want to move FCR from 3 to 2. That becomes my breeding objectives. And you can set any number of objectives that you need. Then the third, the C, is collection of information. So on the material that are available to you, you need to have some information on them. Phenotypic data. So what I mentioned, what is the phenotypic data already? What the feed intake, what the weight gain, what the FCR, what the dressing percentage, what are the body measurements, the body length, width, shank length, and so on and so forth. So you need phenotypic data. And then you need family relationship. So to avoid inbreeding and to know how to do your selection and crossing, you need to have an idea about the relationship of the material that you have. How are they related? And then the genotypes. So how many genotypes do you have there? Maybe you have some birds from Lowman, you have some old pure breeds, maybe you have local chickens from Ghana. So you need to know the genotypes. Still local chickens from Ghana, you have naked neck, maybe you have Fraser, you have Bard, the check color, and so many other genotypes. You need to categorize all of them. And then D, you need to determine your genetic selection criteria. So you need to have a genetic model. So which male to which female, which housing are they in, and so on and so forth. Through that, you can set up a genetic model that you use for your selection. And then you need to do what we call breeding value estimation. So there is another talk, they will be dealing with breeding value estimation. So if you have a population and you measure the average performance of the population for any trait at all that you pick, if you measure the average performance, you can check individuals against the average of that population. So some individuals, their performance will be higher than the average. Some individuals, their performance will be lower than the average. So the difference between individuals' performance and that of the average is the breeding value. So you need to determine the breeding value. It is based on which we select individuals. And then selection and mating. So normally nowadays we use selection index. And to construct a selection index, what you are interested in is the traits that you are considering in your selection. So you may have about 4 traits. So if you want to improve poultry meat, you are interested in weight gain, you are interested in feed intake, you are interested in feed conversion ratio, you are interested in dressing percentage. Okay, and nowadays you are also interested in disease resistance, because you don't want to only produce birds that will perform well but will not be able to survive. So you have all these traits listed. For you to select for these multiple traits, you need to construct an index. Okay, so you construct an index based on the premium that you put on each of the traits. So which trait do you think is more important? So you give it a higher weight. The second less important, you give it a second higher weight. When you do that, you multiply each of the weight of the trait with the economic value of the trait. So in monetary terms, how important would the trait be? So you use that to measure, and when you add all of them together, you get your selection index. So based on selection index, you can make your selection. And you can even predict the response. If you know the heritability of the trait already, you can predict how the offspring will perform before you even do it on the ground. The next one is your dissemination. So how do you want the birds to go out? Remember, I told you that most of the time, breeding companies develop distinct lines and then they do crossbreeding to let the birds out. But in some animal species or in some breeding program, for some reason you may decide to do what we call best to best. So still cross within the same breed, but not engaging in crossbreeding. So it depends on how you want the birds to go out. Then you do your crossing. Either you want to go crossbreeding or you want to do best to best within the same breed. And then you need to evaluate your breeding program. So you do your genetic evaluation to check the diversity of what you have produced to see if it's good. If it's not good, you need to go back and redo certain things so that you perfect the breed that you have done. So generally, this is how a breeding program looks like. And as I describe them, you see that it's not that simple. Within this process, there are various tests that you may have to run to be able to have a breed. Breeding companies buy a lot of genetic material so that they can create a lot of diversity in what they produce. So if you want to do breeding, it requires a lot of funding. Maybe by the time I finish, I will tell you some of my experiences. So commercials are not for breeding. So what to buy from breeding companies to raise, they are not for breeding. So please don't cross them and use them. As I told you, geneticists plan how the genes will look like in the commercials. But the way the genes are in the commercials, if you mate them, there will be a lot of variation. The outcome that you have no genetic uniformity. Okay, so the performance may vary widely. So don't use commercials for breeding. And as consultants and as professionals, always advise farmers to buy quality DOHs that we can be sure of the source and the breed. They shouldn't invest their money in any breeding at all based on commercial birds. I would say that in Ghana, it's a hard time that we get a regulation in this sector. We need a regulation to regulate this sector so that people don't hire to do anything at all and give to farmers to raise. But because there are no regulations, I mean, people hatch anything and they sell to unsuspecting farmers to go and raise, especially those who raise birds under the small scale production. So, in tropical conditions, and in Ghana we are within the tropical region, mostly we produce under natural environment. You know, in developed countries nowadays, they produce under environmentally controlled housing, where all the conditions that the birds would need will be provided. But we produce under natural conditions, mostly under deep litter system. There are a few going into battery cage, but still mostly under natural conditions. Okay, as we see in the picture. So it's a combination of feed housing and other environmental constraints. Because of that, the exotic birds, the birds that we buy from the breeding companies, okay, which are mostly from developed countries, they don't perform to the optimum when we raise them here. And the reason I'm giving is that because we raise our birds under natural conditions. When they develop these birds, they develop them under environmentally controlled housing conditions. They try them under environmentally controlled housing conditions. So when we bring them here, we raise them under natural conditions. Sometimes the quality of feed may be a bit questionable, storage of feed. Housing is a problem because it's under natural conditions. Another environmental constraint, we don't get the same performance. And I wanted to show you, if we say tropical region, what we are trying to say. So this is a globe, and you realize that we have 23.5 north of the equator. You see it at both sides. And then you see the equator there. And then under the equator, you see another 23.5. So the area between the first 23.5 north of equator, 23.5 south of the equator, if you trace that on the globe, you see that there are two lines. Equator has a line, and then 23.5 has a line. That line, we call it Tropic of Cancer. And then the one below, there's Tropic of Capricorn. The space between the two of them, from the start of the globe to the end, that is the area we call the tropical region. Okay? Now, the tropical region is characterized by high temperature. And the reason is simple. You see that the earth faces the sun. Okay? And because this area is at the center, it faces the sun directly. Okay? So it means that this area receive more incident solar radiation. Okay? Because of the temperatures are high within that area. You know the globe, it rotates, the earth rotates. Okay? And the sun faces it as it rotates. So all the areas within this area experiences high ambient temperature. And that is the situation that we find ourselves in. You see the African map in yellow. You realize that most part of Africa are within this region. Probably another continent that is mostly within the South American continent. So you see that they also, more than half of that continent is within this region. But Africa, I mean, we have most parts being within the tropical region. Because of that, high temperature is a problem for us when it comes to producing poultry. And I've told you that it's a problem because we use birds that is coming from another region, okay, which is not similar to the condition that we have here. And the way they raise these birds when they are developing them is also different from what we have here. So that is the challenge. Probably, if you develop the birds here, the parents, the grandparents raise them under our conditions and select them. By the time we have commercial, the bird would have become well adapted to our own conditions. And so that is our problem. Birds are only adapted to the environment that their parents are well adapted to. Okay, so in physiology, if parents experience certain physiological conditions for a long time, with time that can turn genetic, and they can transmit that to the offspring. So the offspring will also become well adapted to those conditions. But because we purchase birds from somewhere and raise them here, we don't have that situation. Okay? And so because of that, when we bring breeders here, they may perform below their potential. They may be prone to infections and to heat stress because of the high temperature, and in Ghana most of the time high humidity also. And if you have high temperature coupled with high humidity, what it means is that you have a very favorable condition for pathogens to grow. And that is also a challenge. That is why we have a lot of incidents of diseases here. Okay? And sometimes I tell farmers that if you practice deep litter for a long time, and some diseases, they take seat. Some of them, they take seat. It's not that your manager is not good or the material come there is not good. Just that the pathogen they have taken seat with the conditions are very good for them. Okay? Some, they fire their managers because they said they are not performing and diseases are worrying them, so on and so forth. Okay? Sometimes it's not their fault. So, how does heat stress affect breeders? We want to look at it briefly. So birds, they are classified as homeotherms. We humans, we are also homeotherms. Okay, what it means is that homeotherms, we try to have the same body temperature all the time. We maintain the same body temperature. That's why if you go to the hospital, and they check your temperature and it's above 37.2, they tell you that you are not feeling well. Because it means your temperature is deviating from the normal. Okay, so they say that you are not well. It's because we are homeotherm, just like the chickens. And we should maintain the same body temperature all the time. So the birds should do that. What it means is that if you put them under high ambient temperature conditions, it means they have to work to maintain their body temperature. You know, humans, we sweat a lot. Whenever you go to a hot place, if you are not careful and you are not wearing a good underwear, everyone will see that your shirt is wet. Okay? What the body is trying to do is to normalize your body temperature. That's why it produces a lot of fluid to cool the body for you so that you can be in a normal temperature. Chickens, they don't have sweat glands, so they can't produce sweat. Okay, and that is a challenge. So it means that heat stress is a problem for them. They only deal with heat stress with what we call panting, okay, to the respiratory system. And panting has its own challenges, because it's the same mouth that the bird will use to eat. So if it's panting, how is the bird going to eat? So that is a challenge for birds. So if you look at it, there is a temperature range that birds feel very comfortable. Okay, we call it a thermo. Naturally, the bird will not feel for feed because if he eats, it's going to compound his problems. So it will not feel for feed. So there will be inappetence. And then increase in protein degradation, there will be oxidative stress within the system. Okay, a lot of free radicals will be in the system and that will result in stress for the birds. But in layman's term, what do these things mean? What it will mean is that there will be reduction in feed intake. There will be poor FCR. There will be poor growth, reduced breast yield. There will be increase in morbidity and mortality. And how we can all understand better is that it will reduce your profit. That's the most important part. It will reduce your profit. Okay, so heat stress is not good for poultry production. Okay, but in developing modern breeds, there is resource allocation. Those who develop the modern breeds, they have allocated more resources to meat production and to egg production. Okay, so if you want the bird to grow very fast, okay, that is good. 6 weeks, the broiler standing tall, huge. But that is not how God created the chicken to be. We have made it that way. Okay? But you see, what God made was balanced. But what we have done cannot be balanced. Well, so let me first explain what a breeding company is. So if we say breeding company, what we are talking about is selection of birds, which takes time, normally not less than 7 years, to develop a breed through which DOHs are produced to sell to commercial farmers. So this sector is mostly driven by private companies. So in Ghana, since independence, we have not had breeding companies. Probably it's because we haven't had private individuals or companies interested in this area. And so no investments have been made so far in this sector.
Should it be a project of an individual or the state? Because we know we consume most or aquana debris in this country. And as a nation, must we wait for an individual to lead that call for us?
Well, government can do it. In some countries, some governments have decided to invest in that area. But personally, it's not something that I would tie to the government solely, because businesses all over the world are done by private companies. If you look at the thriving breeding companies across the globe, they are not government-owned companies. They are owned by individuals, families, and companies owned by individuals.
So what are the incentives for such investors to maybe develop interest in breeding or setting up in a company like that? If there are no incentives, I think nobody may have interest in that. Is the government doing so to, invite people to do that? You've been in the sector for so long.
Well, currently, the few breeding companies that we have around the world, they sell their products globally. And so they can be anywhere and sell their products. So now there are no incentives for people to move to Ghana to make such an investment. If we can do that, then the investment should be made by Ghanaians. So Ghanaian businessmen and women.
I'm referring to the local individuals and the government of Ghana, not the global firms, but the Ghana. How are we positioning ourselves?
Yes, of course. Ghanaian investors can make such an investment. But the problem is that breeding is very expensive. And so if you breed and you want to sell the DOHs only in Ghana, well, you may not be able to make profit, you have to be able to sell the product globally, and that's what breeding companies do today. So it's a huge investment. So anyone who would like to make that investment, it may be good investment, but the person should think of a good network to sell the product globally. Other than that, you may lose your investment.
You've been in the industry for so long. Do you think, or do you foresee government commitment towards the poultry industry, given that there is no any regulation in place to regulate the activities of this sector, and you worry about it as experts?
Well, if you say government commitment, what do you mean exactly?
Because government ought to put up a regulatory body to regulate the activities of this poultry industry. However, there are no system in place in regulating certain, and asking, as an expert, are you happy with that?
Well, it may be good for the government to help bring a regulation to help sanitize the sector. In fact, it's very important that we do so because it borders on biosecurity and public health. Okay, so it's important that we do that in protecting investment of people. But I would say that government is responsible for many things. So those of us who are in this sector, I'm talking about the academia, I'm talking about Poultry Farmers Association, Ghana Standard Authority, Ministry of Food and Agriculture. So all of us, we should come together to push so that government, as a referee for all of us and responsible for all of us, can help to bring regulation to this sector. Already, through Ghana Standard Authority and with the help from Ghana Poultry Project, which was funded by the United States Department of Agric, they helped for us to develop a hatchery regulation, which I know is within the system. I think that we should push for that regulation to come to full force so that we can regulate the sector.
How soon are we expecting this regulation to be in place?
Well, I can't give timelines, but after this program, one of my colleagues, Professor Amido, is part of it. So after this program, we are collaborating with Ghana Farmers Association to contact Ghana Standard Authority to really push for this to come to full force. Yes, it's mainly affecting poultry farmers because people produce any day-old chicks at all, which are not certified, and they box them and sell to farmers. So you know, investment in poultry is very huge. So if you invest in the wrong chicks, you are going to lose your investment. So poultry farmers are really, really suffering.
So can you throw light on your department's effort in bringing out, you mentioned birds that can tolerate heat?
Yes, so my department, we have animal breeders there, myself, Dr. Olympio. We started a breeding program using the naked neck gene and frizzling gene from chicken to produce birds that are well adapted to the tropical environment. We did that together with a private poultry farmer, Akate Farms. He did so well in assisting us to do that work. We reached some point, but he was only one person, so he couldn't continue with the investment. If we are to get investment into this sector, I would say that we have the expertise to produce birds that are well adapted to the tropical condition, and that will help our farmers. And we can even go beyond our borders to sell such a product to West African countries, and with time go beyond that to cover the whole of Africa and beyond.
So is this something that the government is aware?
Well, I wouldn't say the current government may be aware, but we have interacted with many government agencies, Ministry of Food and Agriculture, on several platforms. So they may be aware of this that we have developed.
I just want to understand, with the current trend, how is our geographical location actually affecting the poultry production in the country? Is it increasing? Is it reducing in terms of the production?
Yes, so if you look at Ghana, we are within what we describe as a tropical region. And the tropical region is characterized by high ambient temperature. What it means is that birds experience high temperature beyond what they can bear. And if that happens, they experience what we call heat stress. And that drops production in terms of eggs and meat. If you look at the birds that are raised here in Ghana, they are produced in developed countries. And in developed countries, they use what we call environmentally controlled housing, where they set temperature, humidity, wind speed, whatever the bird will need to grow and develop. But in Ghana, we don't have such housing arrangement. We raise birds under natural conditions. So when we bring in these birds and we don't give them the housing conditions that they are well adapted to, they are not able to perform to the optimum. So that is the challenge that farmers are facing.
So currently, how are you bridging technology and this challenge that you're having to deal with or face with?
Yeah, so the best solution to this is to select breeds that are well adapted to this environment. But like I said earlier, it requires huge investment. Until we get such an investment, we should be able to deal with the situation using other means. If I say other means, what I'm referring to is that we should find other solutions to raise the birds that are available, such as building houses that allows ample ventilation into the structures, growing trees around the farm so that we improve aeration within the farms. Also, some decide to sometimes cool the roofings during the afternoon. You can also provide fans within the building. And then farmers can also check their stocking densities. If you stock too much, birds will be overcrowded and it will increase the heat stress. If you use the right stocking density, birds will feel more comfortable. No, the improvement that I was talking about has to do with genetic improvement. Okay, so geneticists across the globe, they have done a lot of improvement works. Some years ago, it took about 6 months to get birds ready for the market. But today, it takes only 6 weeks for birds to get ready for the market. And that was what I was talking about, that this is mainly due to genetic improvement. Of course, nutrition, environment, housing, they have all contributed to this improvement, but the improvement mainly has been due to genetics.
So are you saying Ghanaians should most of the time crave for chicken? Some of us are vegetarian, so they would make the call to the public that go for their chicken because there's a lot of improvement now.
Sure, chicken is the meat for the century. If you look at projections of chicken meat consumption, it has been increasing and it will continue to increase. That's the meat for the century. Whatever you eat today will have chicken. Of course, if you are vegetarian, we can't force you to eat chicken. But chicken meat is described as the white meat and it's healthy for everyone to consume. Of course, we should do everything in moderation. Well, I won't say significantly, because when birds are ready and you are processing the meat, you just have to make sure that within 1 hour you preserve the meat. So if you have a cold room or a deep freezer, within 1 hour, the processing, you have to take steps to preserve the meat. If you let it stay outside because of a high temperature beyond 1 hour, then the quality may begin to deteriorate. When it comes to eggs, from studies that we have done, it is good to eat eggs when it is within 10 days. If you let the eggs stay beyond 10 days, it will be best to put it in your fridge so that you can preserve the quality.
Thank you very much.